morning, everyone. I don't think I'm on. Now I'm on. Good morning. I am going to call to order the regular board meeting and the PINCO meeting and announce that the June 8th, 2022 regular board meeting is being conducted pursuant to California Government Code Section 54953B concerning teleconferencing of meetings. Board member Dr. Victoria Ruffin is participating in this meeting by teleconference from 4631 East Avenue S in Palmdale, California. This location has been identified on the meeting agenda and the meeting is being recorded and all actions will be taken by a roll call vote. Item B, roll call. I would like to ask Dr. Ruffin to respond to the following questions. Dr. Ruffin, are you able to hear our proceedings on your end?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you. And then the next question is, are you able to hear or do you have a copy of the agenda for this meeting?
Yes.
Okay. Has the agenda been posted at your location?
Yes.
All righty. And is your location such that any member of the public could participate in the public portions of this teleconference meeting from your location?
Yes.
Okay, and now from members of the board, are you able to hear Dr. Ruffin? Ms. Pearl?
Yes.
Ms. McGrady?
Yes.
Ms. Rush?
Yes.
And I am able to hear as well. Okay, let's go on to item C, which is Pledge of Allegiance. Mr. Rush, would you mind leading us?
No, I would not. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All righty. Item C, that's item C. You know, and a past board member, when I first got on the board, she always liked to play the national anthem after reading the Pledge of Allegiance. I have a tendency to just want to break out and sing it, but
Go ahead.
no, you guys don't want me to do that, really. Yeah, I cannot sing. Item 2, recognition, reports, and public comments. Public hearing, open, conduct, and close public hearing to allow for public comment regarding 2022-23 PINCO budget. The board is asked to conduct a public hearing with regard to 2022-23 PINCO hearing. And we'll be opening at 10:04.
Madam President, just a
Yes.
reminder for the speaking public that the same rules apply during a public hearing as do during public comment. 3 minutes per speaker and 20 minutes total for each hearing that's
Okay.
on the agenda today.
Okay. Thank you. Do we have any comments from staff or the board?
Real quick, I
Mr.
can
Hawkins?
add in that PINCO is an enterprise fund made up of 33 school districts. So all of its income and revenues will match throughout the year. PINCO purchases food and then bills the participating districts. So therefore, income and revenues match each year on that.
Any other comments from staff? Are there any comments from the board? Any comments from the public? Rachel, do we have any?
No, we don't have any on this item.
Okay, thank you. With that, we'll close the meeting at 10:05. And move on to item B, which is another public hearing. open and conduct a closed public hearing to allow for public comment regarding adoption of 2022-23 budget. The board is asked to conduct a public hearing with regard to the 2022-23 Antelope Valley Union High School District budget. I'm going to open the public hearing at 10:05. Any comments from staff? Mr. Hawkins?
Yes,
Where'd you go? Oh, there
I
you
have
are.
a short presentation
Okay,
on our budget here. Good morning. We are here to look at the 2022-2023 budget presentation, budget. We are in the budget cycle of the adopted budget, which we do every June. And then we will be back with the first interim report in December, second interim report March, and then we'll be back here again next June, looking at the estimated actuals and our budget for 23-24. And then this September, we'll be here for the unaudited actuals. The district certifies each of our budgets as well as our interims. And it looks at the fiscal health of our initial budget that we have today. We are certifying a positive status, which is the highest you can do, meaning that we will have a positive ending balance, that we're not in financial distress. The LACO will then review our financials after today, and they'll confirm our filing status for a positive on that. We have, one of the things we look at is our unallocated funds, and we're required to identify what those funds are and where we will spend them, or where we're initially thinking today where we would spend them. And that's what this slide shows here, is our ending balance in our general fund, and then our anticipated uses of those funds as we move forward. And we commit those funds to these items. Doesn't mean we can't change them later, but as of today, this is our best guess for example, textbooks. We've got textbook adoptions that'll come up in the next 3 and 4 years. If we don't save for them, we won't be able to afford them then, because they are significant when we start looking at a math adoption across all grade levels. That's an awful lot of textbooks we'll have to do. So we identify our committed resources in our ending fund balance, and that's what this slide is showing. The budget that I'm asking you to approve, which will be approved on Monday, is based on the governor's May budget revisions from his January budget. We do know that the state legislature has already recommended several changes to what the governor proposed. What will happen here is the governor and the pro tem of the Senate and the Assembly Speaker will get together, and they call that the Big Three, and they will hash out allocations of funds in different places. So we do expect some changes. There could be significant changes or just some minor changes, but we won't know until they actually enact the budget and then pass what they call the trailer bills, which can go up to the middle of July, which then explain what the legislature and the governor are thinking on how we should be spending the money that they're giving us. So we do expect some changes. Sometimes they're slight. If they're significant, truly significant, we would come back in about 45 days with an updated budget. But we've only had to do that once in my 19 years. So I don't anticipate that. Most of the changes we'll make will be at the first interim. Just looking at our fiscal conditions and our economic outlook, we had unprecedented revenue growth. This is probably one of the best budgets that the consultants all agree for school funding coming into next year. We had significant revenue growth for the state and their personal income taxes. The revenue that's generated is multiples of billions of dollars for the state of California. Then we look at the economic outlook as we move forward. Is the economic boom we've had really during COVID and pre-COVID, is it likely to continue? We're seeing Mortgage rates go up, which is driving down sale prices of homes, and the interest rate going up causes a higher payment. There are major risks. We've seen significant inflation as we all go to the gas station. We certainly understand that. We have supply chain issues. There's stuff we've ordered months ago and we still haven't gotten it in. We have a tight labor market, not only for schools, but across, excuse me, across the state. We are looking at a COVID surge right now, and we have stock market volatility. And then of course, there's also the Ukraine and Russian war that is causing havoc in international markets, which, because California is such a leader in international exports and imports, that affects us as well. Then we have our specific issues to California, which is wildfires. And of course, we all understand the drought right now that we're in, and cutting back on our water usage significantly. One of the bright spots we have is bus transportation. California has not increased its amount of funds that schools receive since 1981. When I say increase, there has not been a COLA. There has not been $1 added to our revenue for transportation. We received $1.9 million in 1981. That's what we're slated to receive in 2022. So there are currently 2 bills being discussed in the legislature that have the possibility of actually increasing our funding closer to what it truly costs us. We spend around $9 million a year on transportation, and that number has gone up every year, where our revenue has been flat for the last, 40 some years here. So there is a possibility of looking at that, and there are a couple of bills that the legislature has that they may make part of the budget, or they may add it as a separate item. The basis for all of our revenue comes from our average daily attendance. And we are looking at our average daily attendance in this past year. We decreased about 550 students from the prior year. If you remember, the 2 prior years under the COVID regulations on the state, they did what's called the hold harmless. So we kept our 18-19 ADA and held it through 1920 and then 2021. As we look at 21-22 this past year, we were still held harmless, but our actual numbers went down about 550 students. That meant we had 550 students less on average in the classroom than we did in prior years. What the legislature and the governor have agreed upon, so we have put it into our budget, is a 3-year rolling average. So if we then look at our 3-year average, taking 2 COVID years plus our decrease last year, we're estimating our ADA for the current budget year of $19,465, which is a significant improvement over what it would have been at $19,090 using this 3-year average. And that's one of the fixes the legislature and the governor are looking at for the decrease in enrollment and decrease in ADA. When we look at our ADA percentage, there's several factors that we've looked at. One was the required quarantine due to possible COVID exposure or contracting from our students. If a student had tested positive during first semester last year, we would quarantine quite a few students. That means we sent them home. Then we also had students that were not feeling well, non-COVID, but it was more of a just in case. And then we had several students that had an uneasy feeling about being on campus with COVID being out there. One of the areas that became difficult for us is our independent study attendance decreased significantly. One of them is that we were unable to get short-term master agreements signed by parents. And that would be if you went on quarantine for 5 days, we'd have to have that done up front. And then the other issue is we didn't get homework returned in a timely manner. And there is actual ed code on homework from independent study. The work has to come back the first day the student comes back. And if they didn't bring any work back, then we got no credit for them being gone. I like to take a look at this, I call it an oil drum, but this really breaks out if you look and see what our adjusted base grant is, what our supplemental concentration funding is, and then at the top there, that home to school transportation, that's that 1,967,000 that I alluded to earlier that has never changed since 1981. One of the issues we have is that our unduplicated pupil count, that is the English learners, low income and foster youth. And it has to do with them qualifying as a low income. And we normally have been running around 71%, not from a lack of effort from our staff and our school sites, but we were only able to qualify about 66% of our students as low income English learners or foster youth. That's a decrease of about 5%. That 5% equals about $4 million that we are not going to receive in our supplemental concentration grants or our targeted, or what we would call our LCAP. So even though our LCAP, it went up slightly, it would have went up another 4 million had we been able to do that. And so we're working diligently to see about getting these family income statements. There's only a few lines, but to get more of those next year to bring our unduplicated student count back up to our average of about 71%. When we look at our expenses, one of our biggest increase in expenses is our district pension costs. That's going to be the CalSTRS and CalPERS that we pay. Way back when I started in this 20 some years ago, we used to pay about 7%. Today, CalSTRS is going to be in the budget year at 19%. CalSTRS. CalPERS will be about 25%. And that is an increase year over year, as you can see, for the STRS rate of almost 13%. And the CalPERS year over year rate is almost 11%. The reason the increase is so significant is because in the prior couple of years, the state had what they called rate relief for this, and they bought down the actual rate provided through the State Budget Act. So they paid a portion of it. They paid the increase, and we stayed at about 23% for PERS and about 17% for STRS. But this increase, as of now, the legislature and the governor's budget is silent on any buy down. So we will be expected to pay the increased costs for that coming up. As we look at our major increases, expense increases across our budget, as you can see, the benefit costs, which includes the PERS, STRS, and health costs. And our health medical costs are up about 10%. We've got about 5.4 million of our budget, of our new dollars, is committed to that. Retiree benefit costs, that's our new retirees, and we've had quite a few this past year, estimating around 575,000. Then we have an automatic step and column increase district-wide, because as you work another year, you'll move on the step. And if you're a teacher, if you get additional education, you move across on the columns. So we're estimating that at almost 1.9 million is a new cost for next year. Then our special education, where we are increasing our services and our staffing, is estimated about $1.2 million for a total of about 9.1. Now there's several other fluctuations. We have fuel and all those other things in there, but these are the major categories. I kind of like to show our total general fund. That's our restricted and unrestricted, kind of in the dollar form here. So you can see if for every dollar we get, here is the breakdown of where we spend our dollars. So we have our certificated salaries at about 35%, classified 14%, employee benefits 27%, books and supplies 5%, services and other operating costs are 16%, capital outlay, and then interfund transfers is a small amount. The point is, we do spend about 76 cents on every dollar we receive for supporting our staff. Our total expenditures in this year's budget are $350 million. When we look at our unrestricted ending fund balance, this is an estimate of where we think we'll be a year from now. So we believe that our total general fund revenues in the unrestricted, remembering that restricted is Title I and the COVID money and several other factors. So this is just the unrestricted side. We'll have revenues about 263 million. Our expenses are going to be about $65,000 over that. So in essence, we're projecting a balanced budget. 65,000 on 263 million can fluctuate significantly, but we're basically looking at a balanced budget for this next year. We're looking at an ending balance. If you remember that the second or third slide where I had what our committed funds are in our ending balance, that has to do with that 19 million there. Part of it is our targeted funds. Then we have our economic reserve for economic uncertainties. That's the requirement we have to hold 3%. That's about 10 million. So we have an unappropriated of about $1 million. We're looking at having an ending balance of around 31,500,000 this time next year, and that's based on our forecasting. As we look at our total revenues, and this is a picture I like to show the board to show how much revenue, how many dollars come into the district and flow through. If you look at all of our major funds, we're just short of about $381 million that flow through our district in all of our different funds here. When we look at our other fund accounts, we have, if you remember, fund in the first column, Fund 8, that's ASBs. That was enacted this past year by the legislature. And what we do is we take all of our ASB accounts and we lump them into one revenue, one expense. And so that's what we've done here. We have Fund 9 is our AAV charter school. That's night and SOAR prep. Then we have our adult ed. You can see we have a deficit spending. That's because adult ed had received significant money in past years for facilities and things, and we're spending that down. So they don't have a real deficit in their actual revenues and expenditures other than the capital outlay. And so we're spending those dollars down. So that's why it looks like we're spending more than we're bringing in, but a lot of that is built into their ending balance. As you can see, they had a $6 million ending balance to start, and will drop down to about 4.2 million. And that has to do with the facilities and other things that adult ed is doing. Same thing in the cafeteria. That has a negative of about 711,000. There is legislation as well as items in the budget for the state to come in and pick up the difference between when we have our meals, we get paid, let's say $2.10 from the federal government, 60 cents from the state, and it might cost us $3.50. And so the state is looking at coming in and bridging that gap, and we'll pay that down. So this deficit in the cafeteria fund won't happen, but the legislation hasn't passed yet, so I can't plug it in because they haven't exactly determined how much they're going to pay that difference is. But I expect it to be significantly less, if not positive. We have our special reserve, Fund 20, which has a significant balance in it, which we will be bringing a resolution to the board on Monday to commit those funds as well for different line items. Capital facilities, that's our developer fees. So when a developer builds a new house, we get the developer fees. And if you remember, we approved those. I think in January, we approved the developer fee rate. Then Fund 40 is our capital reserve, and the excess rent we receive from next door comes into here. And then we have our retiree benefit fund that is primarily, I believe, is like the Medigap that we provide, and we transfer in about $300,000 each year to cover those expenditures. When we look at our multi-year budget projections, understand that this is a projection, and I expect it to change and change significantly. I just don't know what it is yet. It's not a real prediction. It is a projection, and we go out 3 years for that. So understand we're required to look at where we think we're going to be 1,000 days from now. A lot's going to change. I don't know what it is, but a lot will change. So when we look at our 3-year projection, primarily what we're looking at is how are we increasing or decreasing revenue? How are we balancing our budget? And in this year, we're projecting a very slight $65,000 decrease. Next year, we're projecting a very small increase of $2,000. And then finally, 3 years out, with the hope that our ADA will climb, we're looking at a positive ending balance of around $2 million. And you can see how it flows through into beginning, ending fund balances, as well as our appropriated and unappropriated dollars. As we look down the road, the May revise, as I stated earlier, gives educational agencies a significant reason to celebrate. This is significantly new dollars that are being added. The legislature and the governor are committed to improving education funding. We have several items that we expect will be one-time funds, which we'll have to spend those accordingly. But overall, we do, this is one of the best initial May revisions I've seen in a good 10, 11 years. It's an aggressive budget that the state has put together. There's billions more in ongoing obligations that they're going to have to cover. We do have a blind corner, as they call it, on the economy on where we're going. There is a real threat of inflation, as I mentioned earlier, when you go to the gas pumps, as well as when you look at, with the California drought, your water bill. Those have all excessively gone up. We'll have to see how the state and the legislature and the governor deal with those in the future years. That's yet to be seen. But as of today, this is one of the best budgets that the state has ever provided for education. And I'd be happy to answer any questions you have.
Anybody have any questions for Mr. Hawkins? I do.
Oh, please.
So recently, it's been kind of interesting. So I see that we're going to be operating with a deficit of a little over $65,000, but yet it's interesting. I've had several different organizations lately say, oh, the high school district's got so much money. And so I don't think people are aware of what's mandated costs, what are unmandated costs, and how our money has to be divided. I appreciate the copy of this presentation. I feel like I should carry it with me and share it with people who think we've just got a lot of money sitting in the bank somewhere.
Well, and as you can see on that slide where I used the dollar bill, that's the easiest to explain out of every dollar we receive where we are spending it in each one of those categories.
I appreciate that. Thank you for your presentation. I have one more thing. So Friday, I have the opportunity to meet with Senator Wilkins, Senator and Assemblyman Lackey's office to talk about the busing. And one of those bills does not include reimbursement to districts for additional busing. They both, I think, require busing for students a mile and further. But one bill does not include it's an unfunded mandate, I guess. So what do you think the increase is going to be when we bus students from a mile away?
At this point, and it's my guess only, is that it would be would not be that bill that will get through the legislature. It will be one that will increase some funding today, maybe upwards of $1.9 to $2 billion that then gets dispersed through 1,000 school districts in California. Then they're looking at being able to increase that each year because they have a mandate of for kindergarten, TK through 6th to mandate transportation for your mile for all, and then what they call low income. That has yet to be defined as to what that's going to cause. But that seems to be the likely one that will get passed. But right now I wouldn't hang my hat on it necessarily, but I believe that that's one that I think that one will get passed. So it'll have a phase in of 3 years with, is it 26, 27, then it would become mandated to provide the TK to 6, which doesn't affect us, but low income, and that definition will.
How many buses do you think we're gonna have to get? Additional for the
For if,
AVSTA?
depending on the definition of low income, I suspect AVSTA would need a minimum of increasing 40 bus routes.
Oh,
And the bus is now anywhere from $250,000 to $300,000, and we're looking at 2 or 3 years from now. So take your inflation rate and add it to that. Plus, they also would need to get drivers for all those buses, and every school district will be in the same boat trying to order buses and hire bus drivers. All 1,000 school districts in California. So you could see some wage inflation significantly just to get to cover for that.
I'd really like to maybe get some of those facts and talk to you before I meet on Friday with them. And I know this past year was difficult to get bus drivers. We were short, right?
Yes, significantly, and they are running classes constantly. They'll start with maybe 20, but after they see the requirements of a bus driver, it pares down to somewhere between 8 and 10. And there's also a higher requirement for your, just like our staff, the Department of Justice clearing for prior crimes or misdemeanors, things like that. The bus drivers have to qualify exactly the same way our staff does for a DOJ clearance.
Mr. Hawkins,
Thank you.
Mr. Hopkins, this is Dr. Ruffin. You know, in addition to the transportation issues, I know CSBA was weighing in on that recently, but when you talk about the low income for LCAP and the ways in which we consider how we allocate funds to our kids who are low income, a part of those funds could also go toward transportation. And what I'm hearing in the community is not that people don't want those jobs, it's just that they don't pay enough. And I think that's probably some of the argument that we heard from Classified at the last board meeting. It's, you know, paying them their worth. So I would like for the board or whoever within this community to really consider paying the individuals within our communities their worth, and you'll get people who want to do those jobs. So I think that that's something that we should consider, and also look at what funding source within our district could also compensate that, and not just it being a bill that's specific for transportation. Because if students qualify for low income under LCAP, and that's one of the things that we need to get ADA up, average daily attendance, then it would behoove us to really invest in the ways in which we can get kids to school, especially considering the demographics in our area, how widespread it is in the Antelope Valley. Just something to consider.
Absolutely, thank you. And we have started addressing that at AVSTA. We have done a significant salary increase for bus drivers. Our proportional increase is about $1.3 million in the current budget year for increased salaries for bus drivers. So we are addressing it as you speak, but thank you.
Are there any other comments or questions, concerns? Do we have any comments from the public?
Yes, we do.
Thank you.
Our first speaker, Hal Steinberg.
Good morning, board. So I wanted to comment today on actually a specific item that came up in the budget, talking about the ADA discussion that you're having. So we see, I find it interesting, Mr. Hawkins' comments, because the discussion about the school buses and the discussion about trying to raise ADA, but the ADA trend on that chart shows a decrease over a long term. This is not a sudden thing that there's like an increase that's going to randomly happen. And with cancel the contract, we continue to come here and talk to you guys about the issues in the community. If we want to increase ADA, we need to increase the reasons that students attend schools in this district. And you can talk about low income students. You can talk about students of color, which are the demographic majority in this district. The way that you're going to increase the numbers of those students is by partly what Ms. Ruffin said about trying to get better transportation. It's also school climate and talking about the police on campus, talking about what teachers are doing on campus and what classified staff are doing on campus. And if we're not having those conversations, if we're not being culturally relevant, if we're not discussing why students come to this district, then we are completely ignoring the 88 possibilities of raising the numbers of students who are coming into the district. So I'm not sure what your interests are in the long term. I think, there's a reason that many students go to charter schools. I think it's clear that they're uncomfortable with the climate in the district. And that needs to be looked at seriously if you truly want to have a conversation about 88. There is not going to just be randomly a bunch of new students who are going to suddenly appear in the district. Even if there's a population increase in this community, there's not going to be those students in this district. They will go to charters or elsewhere because they don't feel safe in this district. So if you want to raise ADA, you need to seriously address that issue. Thank you.
Sophia Derfler.
So I would like to address the LCAP, since that's what you're looking at today, and approval of it. The Antelope Valley High School District has failed to account for millions of dollars earmarked for our special needs students. In the 2019-2020 school year alone, more than 6.9 million intended for those low-income students. The vast majority of who are Black and Latinx were left unused or were used for improper purposes with minimal reporting and seemingly no oversight. NLSLA, which is representing the parent of a district student who is impacted by these policies, and Equal Justice Society, which is representing Cancel the Contract Antelope Valley, a project of Reform LA Jails, filed a complaint with the district on February 19th. The complaint details the district's failure to comply with legal requirements governing school spending plans known as the Local Control Accountability Plan, or LCAP, and demands the district investigate budget discrepancies, adhere to state mandated reporting requirements, and require each school to clearly demonstrate how these funds are used to serve the high-need students for whom they are allocated. For instance, the district paid $1.7 million in funds intended for low-income students, English learners, and foster youth to pay for a contract with the Los Angeles County Sheriff Department, but failed to describe how increased enforcement will serve these students. In fact, decades of research have shown that the presence of law enforcement on school campuses disproportionately harms the high-need students of color who are supposed to benefit from these funds. These expenditures, along with the millions that were entirely unaccounted for, have come at the cost of proven strategies that can close opportunity gaps for high-needs students. So I know the board is aware of this complaint, and we would like you to know that after that complaint was forwarded to the California Department of Education, they have opened an investigation into our complaints. So more than likely, you will be hearing from them. And once again, we here at Cancel the Contract are here fighting for really educational justice for our students. Thank you.
A point of clarification for the board, from the 21-22 and in the current proposed LCAP, there are no supplemental concentration dollars going towards a Los Angeles County Sheriff's SRO contract.
Thank you. Rachel, do we have any?
Yeah, Diana Padilla.
Actually, the last speaker probably would have been better served on when we get to the LCAP presentation.
Good morning.
Which we will get to.
Speaking about the budget and how you guys decide to allocate funding, it comes to me as a parent a huge concern about school safety. I have come here time and time again to talk to you about the school site safety plans and how they are developed with the whole fiasco. That's an easy word that I came up with. We see the lack of responsibility you have put into safeguarding the lives and the well-being of our children. And we see that just after what happened in Uvalde, Texas, right? When our most youngest children were sacrificed. For us here in 2018, that Florida high school shooting was a reaction from you guys. And you ought to seek that school site safety gap analysis, which did nothing, actually. It generated no reaction or solution from this board. On the contrary, after that gap analysis was developed, the Highland High School shooting occurred a few months later, that same year in 2018. From there until now, there has been no other safeguard or protocol that you have developed to really protect our children when they're at the school sites. And your failure to do something has come to an unacceptable point. As parents, me being at Highland High School, you can imagine the anxiety that brings me, especially when my son has special needs. And he's in a very severe state of his special needs. And that only adds to the worry and the anxiety as a parent. Again, I have come here to talk about these issues in the school site safety plans that you bring into the agenda, but there has really not been any other type of
30
discussion
seconds.
from you guys, and that's unacceptable.
Do we have any other speakers, Rachel?
That is all for this agenda item.
Okay, thank you. So hearing none, we will close the public hearing at 10:42. And move on to the public hearing. We will open, conduct, and close a public hearing to allow for public comment regarding the adoption of the 2022-23 Local Control Accountability Plan, LCAP, for the Antelope Valley Union High School District. The board is asked to conduct this hearing according to the proposed Local Control Accountability Plan for the Antelope Valley Union High School District, and we will open it at 10:43. Do I have comments? Oh, I have comments from staff.
Good morning, Board and Cabinet.
Good morning.
Just wanted to give you a brief presentation, kind of highlighting and overviewing the key components and highlights for this year's LCAP. So I believe a hard copy was provided for you guys, and then you can also follow
Yes.
along on your screens. So just kind of jumping in as a reminder, there was a requirement for a supplement to the LCAP annual update in February. So if you remember at the February board meeting, that was presented. And so that will be included as part of this year's LCAP document. So I put that just kind of for reference for you guys. As you guys know, obviously the last couple of years have been difficult, and as we transitioned to full distance learning and then transitioned back to in-person learning again this year, one of the things that we do each year as part of our regular process for the LCAP is look at our metric data, look at our academic data, behavior, discipline, all of the different metrics that we use to measure how we're doing, and then use that to determine our actions and our goals. And so each year we have to look at that, obviously, and take a look at where we're being successful and where we need to continue to grow. So the cool thing is that there were, even in the midst of a full year of distance learning, there were some successes. And just kind of as a reminder, as you're looking at this year's LCAP, when we developed the LCAP last year, this is the second year of a 3-year LCAP, we're looking at the previous year's data. So in this year's LCAP, again, we're looking at the previous year's data, which would be 2021. And so looking at the comparison between 1920 and 2021, we did see an overall increase in the number of AP students total across the district. We also saw an increase in the percentage of our A through G completion rate, which again was encouraging, even though we were on full distance at that time. We also saw an increase in the total number of students who completed their CTE requirements as well as qualifying for A through G. So the total number of students that were able to do that actually increased and grew during that time. And then encouraging also was the fact that within our students with disabilities population, we also saw an increase in our percentage of A through G completion. So those were some of the things that kind of stood out as some positives, and I wanted to make sure I shared that with you. And then looking at the next slide, obviously there were some areas that we need to continue to grow and we need improvement. Between 1920 and 2021, we did see a decrease in our grad rate for the second year in a row. We saw an increase in chronic absenteeism, and then we saw a decrease in our AP qualifying exams. However, just of note for the grad rate, I did want to point out that AB 104 is going to be applied this year, and so we do anticipate a positive growth in our grad rate between last year and this year. So the AB 104 is going to play a key role in those numbers fluctuating. And then I wanted to kind of specify real quick. So as you guys again should also remember, the last couple of years we have not had CASP testing, no statewide testing. However, we did use a lot of local assessments to try to make sure that we're staying on top of where our students are at from an academic standpoint. And so looking at our NWEA data for English and math, this particular statistic shows the growth of our students from the fall to the winter. So this is not looking at 1920 to 2021. So I just want to make sure you guys saw that distinction. So looking at just the first semester, looking at our students in the fall compared to the winter, you see the percentage of our students in ELA and math that scored in the high to high average range. And we did see a decrease from the beginning of the first semester to the end of the first semester. However, we do give the NWA 3 times. And so we did give the NWA in the spring, but we're still running the final reports from that. And so I don't have the results for the spring test because that just closed last week. And so once we get those results, we'll get a better sense of how much the students grew over the course of the entire school year. The next slide just kind of summarizes the interaction we had with our educational partners as part of the process for developing the LCAP this year. We met with our district and site leadership team multiple times to look at not only the metric data, but also to look at the current actions to see if there was anything that we needed to address and adjust for this year. The district EL advisory committee actually meets monthly throughout the year, but at 2 of those meetings specifically, we did address the LCAP, went over the actions, talked about some of the, again, gave them some of the data on how we're doing in certain areas, and then gave them the opportunity to provide feedback and advice on how to move forward. The district parent advisory committee met with them this year, as well as our labor groups. Our SELPA, local special education committee, we met multiple times during the spring to look at it through a special ed lens. And then we also provided a survey to the community, parents, staff, and students in the spring. And we had over 17,000 survey responses. And that survey was specific to the LCAP and the actions and the goals that we have within the LCAP to get feedback on that particular, on the particular goals. And if you have any questions in the meantime, you guys can interrupt at any time.
Can I just make one real quick comment? Thank
Sure.
you so much for making sure that you meet with the different groups. I do appreciate that, and I hope that continues and maybe even enlarges. We have more people that we connect with. Thank you for the survey too.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so moving on to the summary of our goals for this year. Again, as a reminder, we are in year 2 of a 3-year LCAP. And so we're not looking to make drastic changes, but we do want to adjust in the areas that we need to adjust. And the one kind of major change for this year's LCAP is we were required by LACO to add an additional goal this year that is specific to our students with disabilities. So last year's LCAP was 4 goals: college and career readiness, 21st century learning environment, rigorous curriculum, our safe and positive school climate, and then also building relationships with our educational partners. So the 5th goal, as I said, is specific to supporting our students with disabilities. I did want to point out though, if you look at our previous LCAP historically, we have always provided support for our students with disabilities, and that has always been included as part of our LCAP. So if you look at last year's LCAP and goal 3, there was an action item that was specific to our students with disabilities. So it doesn't really change what we've done in the past. The difference is that now there is a specific stated goal within our LCAP and then corresponding actions that are going to go along with that and support that. So just want to make sure you guys are aware that that's something we have historically always done. It's just now it's going to be a little bit more specifically stated. All right, and then moving into the next slides, I'll go through this a little bit quickly because you probably don't want to read through every single one of these lines. And I know that the type is a bit small. What I did is I took a screenshot. This is from the eLCAP template from LACO. This is how we submit our LCAP each year to the county. We did already submit our LCAP to the LACO for feedback, and they've already gotten back to us with some of the things that they felt that we needed to change, and those have already been addressed. But this just kind of gives a summary of the metric data that we look at each and every year. Things like our grad rate, our RFEP class reclassification rate, our college of career indicator, our CTE pathway completion, so on and so forth. So it starts with our baseline, which is year 1 of our LCAP. Year 1 outcome, again, is last year's data. So that would be going into year 2 of this year's LCAP. And so this just kind of summarizes the data and the types of data that we look at. So this is a list of the specific actions for goal 1. And I did want to just highlight a couple of things for you real quick. So again, even though it's year 2 of a 3-year LCAP, we do want to make changes each year based on the data and the feedback that we get from our educational partners. And so in the category of increasing and improved services, action 1, we are looking at increasing the total number of student field trips. That was something that we just weren't able to do a lot of this year, coming off of a year of full distance. And then starting the school year, as you guys remember, there were still a number of restrictions. There were still a lot of places that we just weren't able to go, either because of vaccination requirements or masking requirements, transportation limitations, things like that. So we're hoping that in the next year, that's something that we're going to see a huge increase in, is the number of college field trips and student field trips that we're going to be able to do. And then we're also looking to enhance our NWEA, the formative assessment, in action 5. As I said, that's been one of our primary local indicators in terms of our academic growth and improvement. And so that's something that we're continuing to look at growing and enhancing as we go into the next year and expanding that into the area of science. So right now we're already in math and English. We began that process of testing in science. And so that's going to be an important tool moving forward so that we can track our academic progress. All right, and then moving to the next slide, goal 2. Again, this is the summary of the metric data that we look at and how we did compared to last year. And then moving into the next slide, looking at the actions specifically, wanted to point out some of the areas that we're looking to increase and improve for this year. Specifically, action 1 in the area of school counselors. We have built into this year's LCAP the addition of 2 new counselors so that we continue to look at that overall counselor to student ratio. We want to continue to work on bringing that down and making that more manageable for our counselors, and so we can provide more services for our students across the district. In action 2, enhanced counseling and student support services. We have built into this year's LCAP, we're going to be adding 5 new social workers and 1 school psychologist. So that is an area that we are looking to significantly increase and improve. And then also in the area of professional development, as we continue to move forward, we understand that a big piece of school climate and what we do in terms of supporting students is also making sure that our staff is properly trained and just providing as many opportunities as we can for them to be trained in the areas that they need to serve our students better. All right, moving into goal 3. Again, this is the metrics slide. And then the next slide is the actions for goal 4. I'm sorry, goal 3. And wanted to point out some of the areas that we're going to be increasing and improving this year, again, based on the metrics and the feedback we got from our educational partners. Specifically in action 6, improve attendance. So we are going to be allocating some additional resources. We understand the importance of our positive attendance. And so we are going to be increasing or improving additional resources to support our community attendance workers and our attendance offices so that we can address that. And then under classified professional development, We're going to be looking to increase that as well. So it's not just our certificated staff, but also our classified staff will have increased opportunities for professional development. And then under action 10, as you guys know, we included or we added a director of equity to our district. And so that person is going to continue to work with our site teams to look at how we continue to work on the implementation of our PBIs program, our student support centers. And then we also started significant work this year and made a lot of progress in developing an MTSS framework. And so the director of equity is also going to be heavily involved in that process moving forward, so that what we're doing from the district standpoint is much more comprehensive and really looking at the social, emotional, behavioral, and academic. And then action 13, we're also going to be adding additional resources to our independent city program that serves primarily our foster youth. But we want to continue to see that program be enhanced and grow towards the future. And so we have some allocated additional resources for that. Okay, moving into goal 4, again, the metrics that were used for that. And then under the actions, we're looking at increasing the resources for our EL parent workshops. We want to continue to increase the number and also the opportunities for our EL parents and our EL staff to go to specific PDs, conferences, things of that nature. And then action 8, the SEL support.
I had a quick question for this one.
Yeah,
Sorry,
absolutely.
sorry about that.
No, go ahead,
I have
Dr.
a lot of questions, but I just can't skip this one. You know,
Okay.
it's interesting when we report these numbers out, it's almost like, generalization, but it would be more helpful to the community to be more specific in regards to what are the actual numbers, right? So like when you talked about goal 3, you said foster youth, but how many foster youth do we have in proportion in the entire district, right? How many EL students do we actually have in our entire district, and how we're deciding how we're allocating funds? I think that would provide more transparency when we look at what's driving the ways in which we're allocating money, instead of just making it seem like it's a popular group, right? And I would like to hear those numbers. Unfortunately, we just got this presentation as a board, like a few minutes before the board meeting, because I would have asked that question before to Mr. Nehan, but I would like to know exactly like what are our numbers. So if it's 500 foster youth out of 2022, like give us the percent so we can really kind of, visualize what you're saying in relationship to how these monies are directly impacting these students.
Understood. Thank you. And I'll get that information for you.
Thank you so much.
Under action 8, SEL supports. As you know, we have a wide variety of social emotional learning supports across the district. We have a number of resources, but what we're finding is that it's difficult for people to access those if they don't always know about them or aware of them. So one of the things that we're going to be focusing on specifically this year is trying to make sure that people are more aware of, and that we're promoting what those social emotional supports are, not just for students, but also for staff. So that's one of the things that we're going to be improving and increasing this year. And then, as I mentioned, we do have a new goal this year, goal 5, our students with disabilities. And if you look at the metric data, that is metric data that is specific to students with disabilities. So when we look at grad rate, A through G completion, chronic absenteeism, and so forth, that is data that is specific to that particular student population. And so if you look at the next page, which is the actions that we have planned for this year, again, many of these things were things that we were already doing, and now we're stating those things a little bit more specifically in our LCAP. So under action 2, increased academic support, we have built in this year the addition of 8 additional paraeducators that are going to be specific towards going into some of our general ed elective courses to support our students with disabilities within those classes. And then also action 3, our SPED support staff. We're building into that the addition of an additional transition specialist to support our students with disabilities. So the next couple of slides just kind of summarize some of the improved and increased services that I had mentioned throughout. And so these next 2 slides are just kind of a graphic visual of some of those changes and improvements. All right, and with that, I just wanted to kind of close out with a reminder of why we do what we do, to give our best every day so that those we serve are inspired and empowered to become their true best. And with that, I will open it up to questions from the board.
Thank you so much. Great presentation. Again, I wish I would have had more of an opportunity to view it in advance. So some of my concerns are about like our graduation rate. Thank you so much for being transparent and mentioning the AB 104 students who are graduating and how that will improve the graduation rate. I'm also looking at those students who are 5th year and 6th year seniors. I think we need to take that in consideration as well. Those students who are taking much longer to finish high school, and what are those reasons why, right? So that we can really tackle more of a preventative way how we can get them to finish within the 4-year graduation rate. So I don't know if we have those numbers. And then my next issue is, I think it was Mr. Nehan who mentioned that there's no police funding was, allocated by this board. But what we know is that the Board of Supervisors decision is what directed that money's not to be allocated. And if those monies are not there, what I did not see is where are we now putting those millions of dollars that we previously put in that space. So I would like for some clarification on that, if it could be provided to the board and the community. And then my other issue was, one administrator shared with me last week that, was this overall concept that everyone wasn't struggling financially due to the pandemic. We were just kind of having some discussions about why some of our students and our staff are not showing up and being present. And she said that she wasn't seeing, that impact in the financial space. And I know based off of the LCAP and what Mr. Hawkins shared, a large portion of our budget goes towards our staff. And what I can say is since I've been on this board, every teacher increase, the board has voted for that. Our administrators have gotten an increase, but I'm not really seeing the same parallel trajectory of increases for all of this money we're spending. You guys just mentioned the equity position. Okay, we got the position, but what is the position actually doing, right? The accountability piece and what are those measurables? I don't see that really spelled out in the LCAP, and it concerns me because it's traditional. We get all this money and what do? We hire more people. We're more top heavy, and we're giving all these high salaries, but there's really not a lot of differences in like the ways in which our students are achieving. And then the last thing I wanted to address was the goal number 5, when you talked about our students with disabilities. I want to look at the proportionality of people who are placed in special education. This has been data that's been shared out through UCLA, all throughout the county of Los Angeles about the Antelope Valley and the ways in which, African-American students are disproportionately identified in special education in certain districts, right? And if we're only 14% of the population, why are we like double or triple the amount of students in these spaces? So I would like for more transparency for us to see. One thing I am proud about that the Senate and the AD, Rob Bonta, has pushed was the Reparations Task Force for Black students. And one of the things that they're zoning in on is including Black students in the LCAP, because right now we're not in there. Right, but really focusing on the trajectories of how certain groups and minorities are being treated and making these funds really count in the future. So maybe in our next LCAP presentation, I know it's too much for you to give me these responses right now because again, the board just got the presentation like 30 minutes before this meeting, but I would like, some transparency on these concerns. Thank you.
Thank you, board.
Okay, and do we have any other questions from board members or concerns? Thank you, Mr. Laird, Dr. Laird, I'm sorry. Your
Great presentation, Dr. Laird.
Okay. Do we have any comments from the public?
Yes, we have 2. Vivian?
Good morning, Dr. Ruffin. Good morning, Ms. Orozco and Ms. Marissa, because Christine's gone. I'm here today, this morning. I'm really appalled that I'm here this morning because I think about how often I came to you guys to come to the district about my concern that Dr. Ruffin was the only one that came through helping. But what kills me is the fact, like I'm listening to all this about land cap, and I wanted to talk about it from even last meeting that they were about where the funds are going and stuff. But what kills me is how there's not enough parents here. You guys are having a meeting at 10 o'clock, and I don't care that the school is already closed with graduations and different things. The issue are, you guys are here because parents have sat their kids and brought them to this district, but we don't have a good 10 parents probably up in here. And it's just amazing me how every time, and even because you all have become this board majority, you feel it's so convenient to like make meetings at any time that you feel, regardless of thinking of the parents. I'm just appalled to think, how the heck do you think people feel that teachers that really want to be here and parents that want to be here, they can't be here because you think it's funny. And I guess I say that because I'm looking at you sometimes, Miss Wynn, because I think sometimes you're so condescending in how you always are making your statements about certain things. But what I feel the most about all this, for this here topic, I look at you all and I say, you have this paperwork that's being put up here to show everybody about what you're doing for the district, but it's already been stated. Kids in this community are not being served. And you know it. The special ed kids are not being served. Kids, brown and black, are not being served. This funds that they're talking about, that the council of contracts is saying, there is proof that there's some stuff that's been going on, even with this young lady here. Again, the press person from AV Press. You guys know that money has been messed up when we had our last superintendent. Let's not play stupid to think that he didn't know Mr. Vieira and all the things that you all were a part of, knowing that these funds are not where they're supposed to be. So why aren't you able to do one thing for me? You have police officers sitting on these campuses. They could throw down a young girl and they could hurt her and do all this. And the AV never comes up and speaks about none of it when the public or when the people come out and ask, why aren't you guys speaking? You don't have accountability for officers to do what they're doing. But guess what? In the real world, if a police officer did that in the real world the way he shouldn't have done it, they would have put them in like maybe a little timeout, you know, an investigation. But you guys brought these people right back to the schools to hurt these same kids. So when you think that the money for land cap, disabled kids,
30 seconds.
other kids that are having issues, and these independent study classes that you guys probably don't even do a little bit of a survey on where the kids really need help out here, all this stuff that you speak about so eloquently, or you try to, you sit here and act like you're doing so much for the community. But how does it look for a black young lady to see herself thrown on the ground and everybody in this school can actually say, here comes the sheriff is back to school the next day smiling? It's on your watch. It's on your watch that these things are done, and you should be ashamed.
Chelsea Helena?
Good morning. My name is Chelsea Elena. I am an education rights attorney with Neighborhood Legal Services of Los Angeles County. Today, I would like to address 5 concerns with the district's proposed annual update to its local control accountability plan. First, the district received over $3.9 million of additional concentration grant funds to increase the number of staff who provide direct services to unduplicated students. As we know, both supplemental and concentration grant funds by law must target the unique needs of the district's high need students, these being English learners, foster youth, and low income students. The district's LCAP proposes to use part or all of this grant on custodial or maintenance staff, which would conceivably and indiscriminately serve school and classroom spaces available to all students. The law does not permit districts to use concentration grant funds on services designated for and provided to all students regardless of circumstance or need. Second, the district identified an overall budget shortfall of about $4 million. However, the space in the LCAP template where that requires documentation of how the shortfall impacted the district's ability to meet the needs of high need students was left blank. The community deserves to know how the shortfall was or will be allocated. Third, the trend that I spoke to at the May 18th board meeting of high need students and high need students of color faring far worse than overall district averages continues in this year's LCAP, reflected in falling graduation rates, lower reclassification rates for English learners, regression or negligible progress on assessments, and fewer AP exams taken and passed. And yet, despite deficits for high-need students increasing, the district hasn't allocated additional funds or programming to effectively reverse these trends. For example, although the district has added 2 additional counselors, the student-to-counselor ratio remains at an alarming 334-1. Fourth, the LCAP states that the district has transferred an unspecified amount of supplemental and concentration grant funds into a fiscal reserve account so that other grants could be spent down. Sending unknown amounts of S&C funds that must be spent with significant public oversight into a nondescript reserve account obscures and frustrates public accountability processes. The public has no way of knowing how much money was placed in this account, so it can't ensure that funds are carried over are eventually put to proper purposes instead of being improperly converted to base funds or other restricted funding sources. Lastly, there are no
30
goals
seconds.
for numerically significant pupil subgroups, including Black students and homeless students, which is out of compliance with Education Code Section 52064B1. And then I wanted to provide a few stats that Dr. Ruffin requested. The district currently has about 23,000 students, 16,303 are low income, 2,143 are low income, or excuse me, are English learners, 430 are foster youth, and about 15% of students are in special education and 27% of those are Black. Thank you.
Diana Padilla.
Ms. Padilla, if you're comfortable in taking your mask off, it's a little, thank you. It's just a little hard to hear.
No problem. I was seeing the LCAP and the information provided to us today, which looks really nice. I was just a little concerned. When they talked about parent input and sharing it with the groups, it's a little concerning to me if it's a mistake or it's on purpose. So the SELPA did meet on February 14th, but not on May 12th. And on your document, it states that we did, and that meeting never happened. It was May 10th. And at both of those meetings, we did not discuss anything in regards to the LCAP. So, I mean, you could view the information online if you would like to on the SELPA website, and you can see our minutes and our agenda, and we never talked about the LCAP. So I don't know who you guys share that with, if it was a private meeting that you guys held. Also, the DLAC, we did meet on April 13th, and we did have this information shared, but there was no input from the parents requested. They asked us to fill out a survey online, which we don't know where that fell to, if it fell to some deaf ears. On May 11th, we didn't have a meeting. So, I mean, you need to fix that record too. You can also go on your own website, AV High School District, look at your agendas, and you'll see that May had no meeting. So you guys can fix that too. And when are you guys actually going to talk to the parents? When are you going to share that information with us? When they were talking about that new goal, which is in regards to students with disability, I mean, it looks really nice that you guys are finally putting it down in writing, because for years, I've been asking what actual services you have to give my son that has special needs, what ELD services you have for him, and there's none. So when you talk about bringing more funding to target them, I mean, the real question here is who's gonna do the accountability? So
30 seconds.
that's what we need, some accountability. So thank you.
That's all the comments we have on this item.
Thank you. Oh, okay. We will be closing the meeting at 11:15 and moving on to item D, which is a public hearing for open, conduct, and close a public hearing to allow for public comment regarding adoption of the 2022-23 Local Control Accountability Plan, LCAP, for the Academies of the Antelope Valley, AAV. The Board of Trustees is asked to conduct a public hearing regarding the proposed Local Control Accountability Plan for Academies of the Antelope Valley, and we will open it at 11:15. And we do have comments.
Good morning again, board. I'm not going to go through the entire PowerPoint again. It's the same basic PowerPoint because AAV, as you know, is a dependent charter. And so when we do our educational partner engagement and when we collect the data, look at the metrics, we are looking at those things at the same time for our Academies of the Antelope Valley. I will just point out a couple of slight differences. If you go to, I believe it's the third slide. We did pull out, as I said, some of the data that was specific to AAV to look at some of the things that they did from a success standpoint and then also areas of growth. So if you look at the successes slide, graduation rate, they did actually increase their grad rate from 1920 to 2021 to 100%. Their A through G completion rate went up to 65%. And then their highly qualified teachers are still at 100%. So that is specific to the Academies of the Antelope Valley. Under areas that need improvement, the next slide, again, looking at the 1920 data to the 2021 data, there are obviously some areas that we need to address in regards to the CTE pathway completion, chronic absenteeism, AP qualifying exams. And then again, we're using our local academic data, the NWEA, because we haven't had the CASP testing in the last couple of years. And so taking a look at our English and math scores and the areas that we need to improve in those areas. So other than that specific data, the presentation is virtually the same, but just keep in mind when you look at the metrics slides and you look at the actions those are going to be more specific to the AAV. Also wanted to point out that because they are separate from the district, when the county looks at them, they were not required to include a fifth goal for students with disabilities. And so that is continuing to be addressed within the 4 goals, but they weren't put under that same requirement to add a specific goal to their LCAP.
So we don't have a specific goal, but we are addressing it.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, we have actions within the LCAP to address that.
Thank you.
And one of the big differences, well, I shouldn't say big differences, one of the slight differences on goal 2, if you guys want to look at the actions slide on that. So there was an action from last year that did not get carried over. So you won't actually see it on the slide because it was removed. There was an action that was specific to some mini grants that no longer apply this year. And so that action was removed because it no longer applied. Other than that, the actions from last year's LCAP have been rolled over and are continuing into this year. And they're going to continue to monitor their data to see the areas that they need to continue to address and improve. And with that, are there any questions on the AAV LCAP?
Do I have any questions from the board? Thank you.
Thank you.
Do we have any comments from the public?
Not on this item.
Okay. Hearing none, we will close the public hearing at 11:19. And move on to item E, which is comments from AVTA. Do we have any comments from AVTA? Seeing none, do we have any from CSEA?
Good morning.
Good morning.
So here we are on a Tuesday morning. I'm sorry, Wednesday. My days are getting confused. So CSEA wants to wish and congratulate the district and all of the sites on making this year's senior graduation one to remember. It was good to see our students and their families excited and celebrating their students' successes in a manner that we haven't been able to enjoy in a couple of years of COVID. Last week, I also encountered a family who was celebrating their granddaughter's graduation from Fort Sill High School. As 14 family and friends gathered at the Olive Garden for their dinner celebration. It was a wonderful time for our seniors, and you helped them make it happen. Even though the school year has ended for our students last week, and we closed it out with the vibrant graduations, we're already preparing for our summer school and moving towards next year's school year. If June doesn't slow down, we'll be in August before we can turn around. So just a little update from my last comments on May the 18th concerning the 2 grievances that CSEA has with the district, just in case you haven't heard. We are currently in the formal level 2 with both of these grievances. And as of yesterday, June the 7th, CSEA requested that these be put in abeyance. The reason that request was made was in order for CSEA and the district to have ample time to be able to schedule a meeting that would be acceptable to both parties. And your representatives have already reached out to us to have times and dates for selection. And we want to thank Mr. Neal and Mr. Furno and Mr. Ramos for reaching out and responding so quickly to try to secure some kind of a day and time that would be good for all of us. I spoke to you in April about the upcoming Juneteenth holiday, and I hadn't received any response concerning it until yesterday. And CSEA wants again to express their appreciation to the district for their team reaching out to us concerning this holiday. I can tell you that both the district and CSEA negotiation teams really did work diligently on the MOU concerning it. However, after due consideration and lengthy conversations, CSEA could not sign a tentative agreement. We want to express our hopes that the district will continue to follow the practices they exhibited last year by adhering to the collective bargaining agreement and providing the Antelope Valley Union High School District employees the capability to enjoy and celebrate this holiday, Juneteenth. And I'm sure that everybody is enduring the rising gasoline prices, which of course will take its toll on our summer outings and vacations. And as if it hasn't already started taking a toll on our work weeks. And to complicate our days, I'm sure you've already begun to experience the warmer days and evenings. Our weather is bound and determined to move more into the July and August conditions. And I, for one, I'm not looking forward to the triple digits. We do want everyone to stay relatively cool and hydrate during these days. And remember that heat can be a killer. So please take care during these excessive heat days that we've got coming to us. If you have any trips or vacations planned, please be safe and enjoy your brief time before you have to get back in through the thick of things. And I hope that you have a pleasant week. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you. Okay, moving to item G, which is public comments from the floor for agendized items. The public is invited to address the board on any agendized item at today's meeting. Individual speakers are limited to 3 minutes each, and the total time for public input on each item shall be limited to 20 minutes. During public comments, the board listens to concerns and issues. The board may ask questions for purposes of clarification And the law prohibits, however, the board from entering into a dialogue with the public or taking action on items not on the agenda. Are there any comments?
I
at
don't
this
have any
point?
comments on this item.
Pardon me?
There's no public
Oh,
comments on
there's
this
none.
item.
Okay, thank you. I'm sorry. Item H is public comments from the floor on non-agendized items. The public is invited to address the board on any matter not on the agenda that is within the jurisdiction of the board. Individual speakers are limited to 3 minutes each, and the total time for public input shall be limited to 20 minutes. During public comments, the board listens to concerns and issues. The board may ask questions for purposes of clarification. The law prohibits the board from entering into a dialogue with the public or taking action on any items not on the agenda. Are there any comments?
Yes, we have 2 comments. Vivian?
Thank you, Mr. Roscoe. I really got a little lost on something because I made a comment and that's what I put on the agenda when I came up here the first time. So I wasn't sure about how that all works, but I think what I was gonna make sure I speak about was the civility, this comment that you just made, Ms. Nguyen. I really had something to say about how I've shared with Mr. Vieira back in the day, how I didn't like the way Grady speaks to Ms. Ruffin. And this is what's really getting me today. I'm looking at how you come in and you kind of make your statements about how many years ago you used to be here and the statements of what's false and what's not false and where the money trail is going. And always it seems that there's still this attack on Dr. Ruffin in a sense. What I feel is how Dr. Grady, well, Ms. Grady would say, you don't come to the closed board meetings. Well, I wouldn't come to them either. And you guys already know why. With the fact that you guys have done so much abuse to her in the sense of retaliating for her to stand up for people, it's really appalling. And when I say that appalling, that I want to reiterate this question I asked you again when, and you could dialogue with me. When I asked you about the photo picture that I have of you and Grady sitting at the school, standing there with your petition, which is the recall for Dr. Ruffin, Perel, and Bob Davis. You have on your face a big picture, and so does Ruffin. I mean, not Ruffin, excuse me, Grady. You have it with the cross on it, which is a target. And even it's so true to say it because even Stockdale has the picture. He's the person that helped start it, that recall. You guys had the nerves to have a photo with your crossing a target like a gunshot. And you know what I'm saying? A target like you're hunting for them to make sure that you recall. And I want to hear you say to me again that that's not your picture, because your picture is in it, your name's in it, your picture's in it, and a parent is in it. But I just want to hear you say, oh, that must be photographed, because it's not a whatever that photo stuff. Because see, I don't know all that stuff. I know of pictures that I know that's been published and real loud and clear. So my thing is, what is this attack that you all are getting always that you feel about Dr. Ruffin? It's wrong. It's wrong to attack her about the fact that she's standing up. I mean, I thought we came to this district to ask for questions to get help. And honest to goodness, it's a sad, appalling thing that even in the special health department, even in everything that you all say about what you are about, you're not about the kids. So I'd like to have that dialogue with you today, if you want to say that, because I would like to show you the picture itself. But let me go past, you probably won't say anything
30
because
seconds.
that's not the way you roll when you want to roll. But I'll say this, happy Juneteenth. It's Juneteenth month this month. Let's also give prayers out to those young kids and teachers that put their lives on the line. Nothing like some teachers here would do. Some teachers and some sheriffs and all that, they would do certain things to help out. And people like Dr. Ruffin and some of the staff that works here. The money and the funds that you guys are saying that you don't have, and oh, it's going here and it's going there and people don't believe it, pay and help the people of this community. Help them out.
Did we have any more?
Hal Steinberg?
Oh, thank you. I'm sorry. You said 3, didn't you?
2. This will be the
Thank you.
last.
Good morning, board again. So this comment could have been done during the LCAP, and it goes to the questions of, once again, the school climate on campuses. And I want to zero in on an example of a student who faced some horrible experiences on the campus. So this is a student who's going to remain anonymous, who goes to AV High School. This student has been one of the best students on campus. He is, in the past, had positive relationships with deputies, with security on campus. And during a number of months ago, he decided to play a prank on his teachers and some of the staff, where he took a Rice Krispie treat, a couple of them from a box, and hid them. So from a small little prank over Rice Krispies, and we could probably remember that Trayvon Martin was killed over Skittles, but this prank turned into this student being put in handcuffs, put into a security room, where he ended up crying because he was devastated as a good student who had a positive relationship with security and the deputies on campus, suddenly becomes a student who's now being put in handcuffs and being treated like any other criminal, right? Not that we actually think criminal, whatever. Okay, so anyway, and after this occurred, he went to a number of teachers. He told them about what had occurred, and he was then made to apologize to those teachers, and he was made to tell them that he had lied to them about his experience, that this was all a made-up story, that nothing had occurred. In the meantime, he had been intimidated and told that he would not be able to attend grad night, he would not be able to graduate. So then he feared, and you can understand why he wants to remain anonymous, he then feared that he might not be able to go to college, and he had a whole career in front of him that he wanted to do. He wanted to be a lawyer. And so if he couldn't graduate, how's he going to become a lawyer? So after this, one of the other concerns is that his family is of mixed immigration status. So when we're talking about him being intimidated, when we're talking about him not being able to graduate, being put into handcuffs, his family then became concerned about this issue because they have mixed immigration status. Additionally, he has cousins and other relatives who go to the school, and he was concerned that if he spoke up, that they might themselves be intimidated in the future. And so, my point is, if this is happening to a good student on
30 seconds.
on campuses, can we imagine what is being done to the mental health and physical safety of students who are the quote unquote bad students, or the students who are not graduating, the students who 34% of, even at the academies, supposedly the good schools in the district, are not passing math, or only 34% have good math scores? This is a major issue that needs to be addressed, and the continual refusal to address it is problematic. So I'll leave it there. Thank you.
I have a question.
Yes.
Do you work at AV?
I know people who work there, and they have told me this story. Yes.
Do you work for the district?
I am a member of the community, and I know
I'm
people.
not
Yeah.
being confrontational.
No, that's fine.
You have this knowledge, like you were standing there watching this incident take place. And
Because I spoke to the students, and because the teachers who,
How do you have such, you've talked to a few students and you've got the idea of what the whole climate on the campuses are.
yeah, and some of those teachers have also come and spoken at board meetings, and the challenge is that oftentimes those teachers are afraid to come to board meetings because they themselves also fear that there will be,
I just wondered where you were getting, where you got your information from. 'Cause
Yeah.
I spoke to every director of security, every principal, every administration at every school, asking them about the cancel the contract, their position on it, and that it differs greatly from yours. You spoke, I wondered where you were getting information and if you were an employee on the campus. So,
Yeah, well, as a community member, I do have a right to
no,
speak.
I'm not
Yeah.
saying you don't have the right to
Okay.
speak about it. I'm
Yeah.
wondering where you gain your knowledge.
Okay, thank you. Have a good rest of your day.
Point of clarification for the board. After learning of this incident, district staff did investigate and found it to be that it was not entirely true. However, upon hearing Mr. Steinberg's comments, we will investigate further and try to get to the bottom of it.
Thank you. Thank you.
Oh, that concludes all of our non-agendized item comments.
Okay, that's the end of our speakers then. Thank you. So item I from the board and the superintendent comments. Let's start with Mr. Rush, please. Okay. Ms. McGrady?
Just like a quick congratulations to all of our graduates and their families. I'd like to thank all of our employees for being successful with another school year. Thank you for all the work that you do every day. And I'd just like to wish you all a restful, peaceful summer. Thank you.
Ms. Perrell?
Just want to thank everyone, all district staff, educators, everyone for a great year. Everyone got through it. All the graduations, all the seniors, congratulations and good luck on your road, next chapter in your life. And that was a lot of graduations that I did. So it was actually really nice to see it in person instead of doing everything virtual and whatnot. So I really did appreciate seeing that in person. So, and also happy Father's Day to every father out there that's getting ready to come up. Enjoy your summer.
Thank you. Dr. Ruffin?
Yes, hold on one second. Let me get my notes. I wanted to say, Mrs. Orozco, thank you so much for all that you do. Just want you to know that you are very much appreciated and your diligence to our district is very much noticed. So just thank you for everything you do. My heart goes out to all of the shooting victims across the nation. Since Uvalde, I think it was noted that we had almost 26 other shootings within like a 2-week period. Hopeful for the healing of those who are hurting and those who feel the need to take matters into their own hands. It reminded me of, my former staff in LA Unified. I think it was about 4 years ago when we experienced a live shooting on campus, and I was the head school psychologist who had to manage the mental health of our students and staff. It's something that you never forget. And it's an honor to be able to be there to protect and represent and work through situations like that. And again, it's 4 years later and a gun, a bullet, bullets that are impacting our students' lives. It's just unheard of. And I just know we can do better as a society. Happy Juneteenth and continued congratulations to all of our graduates. I must say, from what I've heard and the graduations that I attended, that Knight High School graduation was the most hype that I've seen in years. I really loved and appreciated their energy, their zeal, and their speeches were very profound. If anybody had a chance to record those, it's something to tune into. I am also concerned about the treatment and the policies that we endorse in our district, as well as the status quo behavior of how we deal with matters. It's really absurd to hear, district leadership come at parents when they express concerns as if the district leadership is the only perspective and the only view. One of the things that I really paid attention to, especially in my research, was looking at this concept of if you were in my shoes, what would you see? And most people in this board are on these boards. I believe some data came out recently that said that, white men are 16% of the entire population, but yet they're in like 90-something% leadership positions. When you look at these boards across the nation, most of them are filled with white people who don't actually interface with Black challenges, low income challenges, minority challenges, but they're the first ones to have an opinion about something and don't even walk in your shoes. So when you have parents who come and they express their concerns, and they want to talk to people about it, the system tells the leadership to push back, but it is very clear why our district does not embrace the views and the inclusion of parents in the Antelope Valley Union High School District. It's very apparent. There should be no argument with parents if they come and tell you that this is how their kids are treated. We're so busy trying to figure out how we can tell them that they're wrong and it didn't happen, or gaslighting them and maybe it didn't happen that way, or bullying, because if you speak up, and you wonder why teachers don't want to come and say anything. Some of the teachers here told me they didn't even want to talk to me 2 years ago because they were told if they talked to me that if they were related to me or they talked to me. And once again, I have no family members in the Antelope Valley Union High School District that work there or employed, okay? But if you came and you talked to me, what would happen to them in response? You get sent to Siberia, which is supposed to be Little Rock High School. It's just all of this internal stuff, and it's real. But just because you're the one or you have the ideology that's pushing this supremacy mindset, whereas this is the in group and you're the out group, these parents are shut up and they're closed off. And at some point, it has to stop. You know, I was accused of, oh, I wanted to have the meetings at night because of my job. I got 30 some days, 20 some days I can take off a year. It doesn't impact me showing up to board meetings, but it really is looking at the culture of our community. We're a bedroom community. People travel down below. We would want to do things convenient so we can hear people's voices, but that's not who we are here. So we have to do better too as a district. And I'm just happy that our teachers work their butts off, our counselors work their butts off. I heard that from our students in the ways in which they talked about their communities at the graduations. I hear it from parents. You know, we have some challenges and we have some good things going on too. And I'm hopeful that one day we can report out on more of the positives than the things that are negative about our district, but really have space and hold space and lean in to deal with all of it. Have a great summer, stay safe and stay masked up.
Thank you. Mr. Nehan.
Sure, just want to echo the congratulations to the class of 2022, the parents and the staff that all worked together to make it happen. I had a great time at the graduation celebrations. I do want to thank the students from Little Rock High School who provided us approximately 300 rubber ducks in exchange for a diploma cover. And I want to wish everyone a great summer. Thank you.
Oh, sorry, let me piggyback on Mr. Nehan too. Mr. Nehan, I think that was a first for both of us as we shook the students' hands at Little Rock. It was so cute to actually get those rubber duckies. And I'm going to send you that picture so you can share with others. It was amazing.
Thank you.
I just have a couple of things. I wasn't able to go to as many graduations as I usually do. I did get the okay from my doctor that I can walk on this foot. But I did attend Lancaster High Schools and they also handed out little rubber duckies. There was a variety of little, I didn't have any idea there was so many. They even have ducky with a graduation hat on. It was so cute. There was students handed the duckies as they came up for their diploma. And I also attended Eastside High School's graduation. Mr. Gomez and Mr. Gonzalez are two amazing teachers. I watched as the students came up and Mr. Gonzalez and Mr. Gomez were behind the stage doing a live stream of the graduation. And I was impressed to see how many students came up and addressed those two teachers with smiles on their faces. Those two teachers seem to always, I don't think I've ever seen them in a down mood. They're always happy, they're always smiling, they're always positive, and it shows through the students. I also, in an unofficial capacity, was able to attend Phoenix's graduation. I have not missed a Phoenix graduation. I always enjoy going to those and hearing the students' successes. They had a few not too many graduates this year, but they were powerful in their statements that they spoke to their family and friends. I also, the school shooting, I just can hardly talk about it without crying. I just can't even imagine what those parents and family and community are going through. And I just want it to stop. I don't want to lose any more kids. Also, one last thing, you know, people can always call me, especially if you have a concern, whether I can give you the answer right away or not, I will always give you the answer. I do think that the majority of people in this valley already have my phone number, it seems sometimes, but if you have a concern or a question and you want to meet, I'm always happy to meet. And if you specifically have a question about me and my motives, you are welcome to ask me that. I would love to sit down and talk. So we go to item J, which is the adjournment. May I have a motion?
Second.
I have a motion by Mr. Rush and a second by Ms. Perrell. Any discussion? Hearing none? Then we'll call for the vote. Ms. Perrell,
Aye.
Dr. Ruffin,
Yes.
Ms. McGrady,
Aye.
Mr. Rush. And Ms. Nguyen is an aye as well. We miss our student board member already. Item passes, and so we are finished with this meeting. Thank you, everyone. John, how do I turn?